Hey guys, this is Megan from HneBadger Cosplay, and today I wanted to talk to you about my methods for planning all of my cosplays. First thing you're going to need to do for planning your next cosplay is to gather reference pictures. This could be done a couple of different ways. This could be done through screenshots of the anime or game itself, and one of my personal favorites, also Google image search. You are going to want to get pictures at a minimum the front, back, and 3/4. If they have a specific weapon, you're going to also want the front and back of those. Sometimes you will be looking at a specific piece and it looks one way, but then whenever you turn 3/4 to the side, you see that maybe it is indented as opposed to just painted on. These are important details to know whenever you go to actually start creating your cosplay, so get as much reference image as you can. Some important things to note about getting these screenshots is don't just save bookmarks for where they are. Please save those images to your computer, a cloud, or a USB or an external hard drive. When you're looking for these reference images, Google image search is your friend. Type in the character and the source material. A whole bunch of stuff is going to come up. High quality images are going to be the best ones to use for obvious reasons. You're going to be able to see more detail. But once you actually click on that, pay attention to the related images that come up. This is a great way to find some off the beaten path sources. I know whenever I was doing my lightning for Final Fantasy, whichever number, at the time that I made that cosplay, the game had not even come out yet. So the only thing that was actually available was some of the promotional material as well as the trailer. I took tons of screenshots from the trailer, which was very helpful, but I also found some very interesting kind of off the beaten path reference material that was from a Japanese magazine. So don't just limit yourself to screenshots from the game. You can also sometimes find that people have ripped the game model and you can open it up in a 3D viewer. That's what I'm currently using for Zelda, or my up and coming Zelda. I don't know when I'll actually finish her, but it is very useful to be able to do a full 360. I've also seen people use official figurines of the character themselves to take a look at more of the details of the character So now that you have your reference images, it's time to do the actual planning for your cosplay. And my process on how I tackle that is I break it into 3 sections. There's the part breakdown, timelines, and then financial planning. So for breaking down the parts, there are a couple of different methods you can do for this. You can either start with the easiest part or the hardest. It really depends on your personal motivation, and depending on the character, I typically change it up. If I wanted to do the easiest part and there was armor on a costume, I could just start with something as easy as a bracer. Those are typically very easy shapes. It's not a ton of material, so if I mess it up too bad, I don't feel bad for trying again. Let's say the character doesn't have any armor and all they have is cloth. I would more than likely choose to start with something that has an established pattern. On my Vi, for example, even though I technically started with her corset, not exactly the easiest thing to do, I could have just as easily started with her little purple shorts. Very easy pattern, not a ton of material. That can give you the motivation to continue as you start to see more pieces come together, as opposed to getting stuck on the hardest part. Just personal preference. I like to save some of my favorite parts for the end. Now, this is specifically because my motivation style is I may get a little too excited about specific pieces of a cosplay, and then when I create them, sometimes the motivation to continue, especially for some of the parts that I don't enjoy as much, will feel like a slog. And that's not exactly how I want to continue doing that. So for me, I get very motivated if I'm able to save some of the pieces that I either know I'm going to do very well, I can do them very quickly, or it's just my overall favorite part of the design. I like to save those towards the middle or the end to help keep me motivated. Now, one thing that I like to do whenever I'm actually planning for my costume, especially if it's something a little more complicated, I like to take physical notes, especially if it is something where I know that this costume is going to take a lot of time for me to actually complete. Taking notes helps me not have to re-look up information that I've already researched. It also helps make sure that I have each of the pieces taken care of, and I don't get to a point where I completely forgot about a part. I typically have most of the cosplay planned out before I ever put a needle to thread. After I've broken each part down, I like to actually put timelines for each of the pieces. The main reason behind this is I absolutely hate con crunch. It is one of the worst things in the world to me. I do not like it at all. I don't like feeling rushed. My work typically suffers for it as well. I just hate it. And I've been doing this long enough at this point that I have a general idea of how long certain things will take me, or if something will take me longer. So I like to give myself little goals that I'm able to accomplish so that I can feel like, again, I'm making progress towards the costume itself, while also ensuring that I have enough time in case things don't exactly go to plan or life happens. It helps keep me on task to ensure that I have enough time to get the cosplay done so that I don't feel that sort of crunch towards the end. Absolutely hate con crunch. Another thing that it helps me do is it helps me with how to order completing each of the pieces. Now, there are some things that you can't really make without making something else first, whether that be okay, so perfect example. So I knew for Megara that these shoulders were going to be a problem. So the overall curve of the shoulders, I needed to make the collar first. If I didn't make the collar, I wouldn't have been able to get the nice curve, nor would I have been able to have the little strapping system underneath. Also, if I had not made the collar first, I would not have been able to do the distance between the shoulders and to make this piece correctly. Otherwise, proportion-wise, it would not have worked. That's kind of awkward to hold. It can help you organize in what order you want to do each of the pieces. And since you've ordered them on how you want to actually create them, you wanted to make piece A before you make piece B, it also helps you on knowing when you need to order your materials and your supplies. Nobody expects you to have all these materials on hand. If you do, fantastic, but that doesn't mean that you have to wait for all of the materials to get started. I know when I was a student and money was really tight, I could not afford to have all of the materials on hand whenever I was making a costume. Typically, I would do bigger, more elaborate builds. So the last thing that I wanted to do was order something too soon and need this one specific piece before I could finish an entire part. By breaking it down and putting your pieces in a specific order, you can actually list out all the materials that you're going to need to complete it. Since at some point you're going to have to order materials, typically in the planning stage, I also do financial planning. I always do financial planning for every cosplay that I do, mostly because I don't like wasting money just like anybody else. So it is important for me to understand exactly how much a cosplay is going to cost me before I even start, before materials are even purchased. So typically, I will go through, and since I have broken down each part, I list out all the materials that I need. Typically in a spreadsheet, I use Google Sheets so that I can see and total up each of the materials and how much it's going to cost me. That way, at the end, I know exactly how much it's going to cost me. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to catch sales on some days, or that you may make a mistake and have to order more material. It happens, and that's okay. But I like to go in knowing where my money is going, and I'm pretty sure everybody would like to know that. I will say that mistakes are not a waste of money. I know that sounds a little counterintuitive, but anytime cosplay is about process improvement and improving in a skill. We don't wake up being master painters, and that is 100% okay. You are going to make mistakes, and you're going to have to order some additional materials, so please do not just order the barest amount of materials that you need. I like to order my foam in bulk because I know I'm going to end up using it. I actually get a better deal on it than if I bought only the amount of foam that I needed for each specific project. It's also allowed me that whenever I made a mistake to have enough material on hand to remake it. And I guarantee you, whenever you remake something for a second or a third time, it's gonna turn out better. For example, when I originally was planning my Okami cosplay, I originally thought that I wanted to do embroidery for all of the animals on the kimono. I thought it would look really neat to have them all embroidered on. However, I bought an embroidery machine and I did a couple of examples on some scrap material that I had, and I just wasn't happy with it. It made the material, since I had to use the stabilizer on the back, it made the material too stiff for my liking. So I ended up researching different ways to do it, and that's when I found out about silk painting. Of course, I was bummed out about essentially spending all this money on a digital embroidery machine. At the time, it felt like a waste, but I already knew that I had Princess Zelda on my list. So it's not like the embroidery machine wasn't going to get put to any use, and I still ended up using it on my Okami cosplay, just only for embroidering the constellations as opposed to each of the brush gods themselves. Keeping track of your finances and how much money you're going to be spending on these cosplays is definitely important, because cosplayers rarely get their money back on a cosplay. Even if they win different competitions, most of the time it is not a monetary amount that the cosplayers are awarded. And I know that $200 or $500 sounds like a lot, but most of the cosplayers that I know, those costumes that win those types of awards are typically much more expensive based off of the materials that the cosplayer chose. So when you are making your spreadsheet, I think it's important to keep in mind on how much you're spending. This is also a really great way to maybe save some money in specific areas. For example, if method A would cost you $2 amounts, and method B would cost you $4 amounts with only a little extra wow factor, then it's good info to know ahead of time. Ultimately, you're the only person who can end up making that decision on whether it's right to spend that money on that specific part, but you can actually save a lot of money as well by choosing where to spend that extra money for that wow factor. All this to say, it is not that you have to spend a ton of money on your cosplays in order to make something amazing. There are plenty of people who do cosplays on some pretty extreme budgets. It's going to be up to you on whether or not it's actually worth it. So the spreadsheet will help break down each of the specific parts so that you can see maybe where you can save some money. I'll be honest, there's no one right way to plan. This is just how I do it, and I will say that the one thing that, as you look up other methods, the one thing that they do agree on is that planning is a continuous process. However, for my method, just remember the main pieces, get your reference, have a plan going in, and make sure you understand how much money you're spending. After all, life happens, but it can go a lot smoother if you have a plan. If you want any more information about anything that I talked about or have some suggestions for me, feel free to comment below and I'll get to them as soon as I can. Until next time, happy crafting.